Hi, everyone, and welcome to Attentive Healthcare Solutions webinar. We're excited to be presenting NextGen PM tools for managing unapplieds, deposits, refunds, and credit balances. My name is Chelsea Grover, and I'm the Marketing Communications Coordinator for Attentive. I'd like to take a moment to explain the process for today's presentation. First, I'd like to mention this webinar will be recorded, and we'll send a copy of the slides and the recording within the next week. Next, for those of you who aren't familiar with Attentive, I wanted to share a bit of who we are with you. We specialize specifically in NextGen healthcare. We're good at getting data into, out of, around, and through NextGen. Basically, our goal in life is to make delighted clients by helping them get the absolute most out of their NextGen software investment. We are passionate about providing solutions for healthcare provider partners, which in turn help them to improve patient care, enhance the patient experience, and maintain a financially healthy practice. To sum it up, we do everything NextGen. We also have some add-on productivity solutions for NextGen, including ChartGuard and Refund Manager. Next, I wanted to mention, speaking of ChartGuard, the next upcoming webinar we'll be presenting is on ChartGuard for NextGen. ChartGuard is a NextGen add-on productivity solutions that creates PDF copies of your patient charts and appointment book, ensuring that you always have access to your charts, even during a system outage or downtime situation. That demo is going to be on Thursday, September 10th, and we'll send an invitation out for it about a week before it, so keep your eyes out for that. Okay, so back to today's presentation on PM tools. At the end of the presentation, we'll open the floor up to questions from you. We'll answer all the questions at the end, but you can type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel whenever they occur to you. And finally, for audio clarity purposes, everyone's phone will remain muted throughout the entire webinar. If you experience audio issues, please use the chat box to let us know so we can resolve them. And again, questions may be entered in the questions box. So while we get started, I wanted to do a quick poll just so that we can gauge where your interest lies, since we'll be covering a few solutions today. So let me get this launched here. There we go. If you take a look at your screen, please let us know what areas interest you the most so we can put extra focus on those today. Possible areas people are interested in might be issuing refunds to patients or insurances, moving around line item credits between charges and encounters, resolving a backlog of unapplied credits, co-pays, prepays, using unapplied credits as deposits for future procedures, or zeroing out balance control, offsetting money on the same charge. So it looks like people are starting to get their votes in for that. So I'm going to give everybody another 15 seconds or so to finish. And while I do that, thank you all for joining us today. I know that you probably had many things that you could be spending your lunch break on, so glad that you decided to join it with us. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Let's see the results. Okay, well, Tom and Joe, looks like there's the areas that we need to focus on the most. Looks like we got a lot of people interested in issuing refunds to patients or insurances, and a lot of people interested in resolving a backlog of unapplied credits, along with quite a bit of interest in moving around line item credits between charges and encounters. But obviously there's interest in all of them. So with that, I guess I'll get into it and I'll present the presenters for today. One of them is Tom Seco. He is the Business Development Manager at Attentive, and Joe Schultz is the Vice President of Product Solutions at Attentive. Joe and his team are the ones that actually build these products, so if you have questions, he's a great guy to ask. He likes to get into the nitty-gritty details of it, so don't be shy. And with that, Tom, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you. Feel free to get started when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much, Chelsea. And thank you for joining us today on this webinar. I put together an agenda, so this is what we're going to cover today. My name's Tom Seco, and I'm the Business Development Manager with Attentive, as Chelsea said. And what we're going to cover today is two areas that are related to the practice management side of NextGen. One, the handling of credit balances on your patient accounts, and the processing of unapplied balances on your patient accounts. You'll gain an understanding of how you can do this more efficiently and more effectively using our two add-on products, our Refund Manager product and our Unapplied Deposit Manager software. And then Joe will go through a demonstration of the products for you, and then I'll come back on and tell you a little bit more about who we are, and we'll answer any questions that you have as well. So a little bit about Refund Manager. You'll see a common theme with all of the products that we've developed over the years is really to make your job easier and increase productivity. With Refund Manager, it is a product that we created that will streamline and automate the processing of credit balances on patient accounts. You'll be able to quickly find the credit balances on the patient accounts and be able to apply credits to other encounters that have open balances on them. We're able to integrate with your accounting application as well to eliminate data entry. So how this all came about is we looked at the process from start to finish, and we looked for ways to streamline and automate the credit balance handling and refund check processing. And when we were done with the process, we saw that we could apply technology to that process and eliminate, as I mentioned, eliminate data entry along the way. We created filters that makes it much easier for you to find the credit balances on the patient accounts. In the way that we presented the information to you, it makes it much easier to make decisions on what to do with those credit balances. And then, as I mentioned, when we integrate with your accounting application, we're able to eliminate data entry along that way as well. For those of you who have multiple practices set up in NextGen, Refund Manager has the capability to look across all of the practices for a full picture, so you don't have to switch between the practices. This is a slide that just shows the process improvements that we did within Refund Manager. So most of the time when you're looking at processing credit balances on patient accounts, you're going to look at various details. You're going to look at the encounter details, you're going to look at transaction details, the account details, and then you're making a decision on what to do with that credit, whether to issue a refund or maybe apply that credit to an encounter that has open balance on it. And once you get through with that process, you're going to take all of that information all the credits that you identified as refunds, and you get those over to accounting somehow. And when it gets to accounting, you're going to print those refund checks. And then when you get done with the printing of the refund checks, you bring that refund check information as far as check number, check date, check amount. Some people enter that back into NextGen, other people do not do that. So with Refund Manager, as I mentioned, we streamlined the process and automated process. Streamlining on the front end, where, as I mentioned, we make it much easier for you to find the credit balances on the patient accounts. As I mentioned, in the way that we present the information to you on the screen, it makes it much easier for you to make a decision on what to do with that credit balance. And then, as I mentioned, with the integration to the accounting application, we move that information over to accounting, and you do not have to enter that information into your accounting application. You just import it in, and the accounting application then prints checks. So really all I have to do is make sure that there's check paper in the printer and the checks are printing out properly. And then on the back end, we do the automation part. So we bring the printed check information as far as check number, check date, check amount, and automatically update the patient information into the patient record. So as I mentioned, we call it streamlining on the front end and automation on the back end. You'll see in the demonstration 3 modules that make up the Refund Manager software: the Credit Scout module, the Batch Detective module, and the Importer module. The Credit Scout module is the module that allows you to find the credit balances on the patient accounts, allows you to take action on that credit balance, whether you want to issue a refund or apply that credit to an encounter that has an open balance on it. You can even task it out to the work log manager to be worked on later. The Batch Detective module is the second module that you'll see in the demonstration, and that module is the one that moves the refund information over into your accounting application. And then the third module you'll see in the demonstration is the Importer module, which is the module that brings the printed check information back over into NextGen as far as check number, check date, check amount. So you'll see all of this in the demonstration that Joe takes you through. So that's it for Refund Manager. Now to give you a high-level overview of the Unapplied and Deposit Manager software. Again, as I mentioned, we created a product to make your job easier and to increase productivity. Now, the Unapplied Deposit Manager software really came out of 10 years of us working with our clients because they asked us to write individual scripts and individual small programs for them to address their unapplied balances on patient accounts. And what we've learned during those 10 years is that the amount of unapplied balances grows in terms of the number of instances and the overall dollar amount for various reasons from organization to organization. We learned money taken from patients as co-pays gets posted as unapplied money at the account level, but then is slow to be posted against an encounter later on. We also learned that taking money in advance of services such as deposits or prepayments can be cumbersome to manage. What we also learned in the past 10 years is that each organization has a different business rules for how they want to address the unapplied balances. Some want to push the line items into a credit state so it can be refunded later. Others do not want that to happen. Some wanted us to look only at specific dollar amounts and match their copay amounts. Some wanted us to apply to the oldest encounters. Others wanted us to apply it to the newest encounters. So we brought all of this information together and knowledge that we've gained over the years and created this robust, flexible product to help billing staffs. So, you know, right, it's a beautiful thing, right? Using technology to automate repetitive manual processes so people can be freed up to do other things. So that's improving productivity. So the process improvements that we did with the Unapplied and Deposit Manager software is typically when you're processing unapplied balances, you need to find the unapplied balances on the patient accounts. You need to evaluate those items and what you're going to do with them. You know, where do you want to apply the unapplied amount, and then you have to create the transactions that you want on what you want to do with that money. And then once you get through that process of all the unapplied balances that you want to work, then you generally have to manage and review those processes. You go through the management process of reviewing the transactions to be sure it is what you want them to do, and then excuse me, and then you post the work as well. So with the Unapplied and Deposit Manager software, you will see in its demonstration, you know, how you can let the software do all of the upfront work and let you just maintain control of reviewing and posting of the work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe and let Joe take you through the demonstrations.
All right, great. Thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining us. We're switching screens here, so your screen size may flicker a little bit. When all's said and done, you should see NextGen Practice Management on your screens here in the GoToWebinar. I'm going to start in the same order that we went through the slides. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the Refund Manager first because that's the longer piece of the demonstration, because Refund Manager is more of an interactive tool for streamlining and automating the refund process. The Unapplied and Deposit Manager will do that second, and that tool is more you picking and configuring the rules, and then it runs overnight and does all the heavy lifting for you just because of the type and effort of work required to calculate unapplied balances and move them around. Both these products, when we install them, we install the user interfaces into your NextGen add-on menu and practice management. So only the people who are configured to see those items will be able to launch them. Refund Manager has an additional level of security in it where you can assign people certain roles. Maybe certain people only work the NextGen side, other people do the accounting integration, things like that. Tom mentioned the several modules in Refund Manager. We're going to walk through the Credit Scout, which is the NextGen facing piece where we're going to find those credit balances and either refund them or move them around or do nothing. We can also move them out to the work log if we want someone, for example, to go ahead and research them later. Once we've taken those transactions and we have refund transactions as part of them, we want to get out to the accounting system. We have about a dozen of them that we interface with, either direct or via files. We'll go to the batch detective, find those NextGen batches that have one or more refund transactions in them and push those over to the accounting system. So again, part of that streamlining and automating, eliminating that data entry in the accounting side. And then once the accountants have printed the checks, we'll import the check information back into Refund Manager and into NextGen. So you'll have that check number, check date, check amount available to you on the transaction in NextGen, again, without having to be in the data entry business. So let's go ahead and jump into the Credit Scout here. The top of the Credit Scout is laid out like mini NextGen search screens where you have the search criteria up above, and then on the bottom you have the results that come up in a grid. The great thing about this is you can interact with the grid down below, and I'll show you how that works too. We have facilities to search for specific credits that we're looking for. Maybe you have a report that you ran or an Excel spreadsheet that you're working off of, and you want to just use Refund Manager to supplement that. So you can either put in a begins with a partial name match on last name, first name. We could also put in a whole bunch of different account or encounter numbers. So again, if we had that report we're working off of, we could go and enter in all of those, and the field will expand if you have a whole bunch of them that you're putting in there, and then it'll go ahead and pull those and the results down below. So we have some clients who do it that way, where they have some parallel process going on and they just want Refund Manager to streamline the transaction creation in NextGen, which it does well. We have other clients who are first doing a catch-up of all their old credits sitting out there, deciding if they want to move them around or refund them or move them off to the work log for someone to research them because maybe that particular encounter or account is a complete mess. So we have the ability to search by date range here. And because this is a demo machine, the date range is fairly wide open, but on your system, normally you'd run with, kind of a 90 or 180 day date range, and you'd probably start 60 days ago from today to let your insurances and everything settle out, and then go 90 days back from that. If you were doing cleanup, you may start way in the past and slowly work your way forward in several month increments. So we give you the ability to use this a couple different ways to find those credits in your system, depending on, again, if you're looking for exact hits from a report, you're working old balances, or you're just trying to keep the new credits in check and just work kind of a sliding range going forward. Tom mentioned we have the ability to filter what you're looking for, to add additional criteria in there. Sometimes we have clients that are in here and say, just give me the credits that are best for refunds, give me the credits that are best to be moved around. So that's basically what these filters do on the top part of this little pop-up here. Is they either they look at the charge balances and go, okay, is there a credit, and do we have debits somewhere else, and evaluates that. And then we added on the bottom part the ability to say, not only do we have a credit on the charge, but let's make sure the payments and the transactions exceed that credit, right? So they've actually paid more. So it's not just a credit from adjustments, but it's a credit from true overpayments. So there's variations on that too. We also have some clients who say, you know what, I'm only working patient refunds or insurance refunds, so on and so forth. So you can filter down by that. If you have multiple practices and your user ID has the ability to see them in NextGen, you can look at a guarantor across practices in Refund Manager. And you can also slice and dice by things like location, provider, department, and so on. And this is all criteria that was added over time working with different clients. And they'd come to us and say, hey, you know what, in our business office, we have analysts that focus on certain providers or certain locations. Can you add that in there? So the great thing about Refund Manager is 15 years ago when we created it, it did a fraction of this, but it's really the input of people like yourselves who are out there in the real world working these credits that have enabled its growth over time and all these additional features that are available in it. So normally in the workflow, if you're just keeping up with your refunds, let me go ahead and set this one to today. And let's go ahead and look for our distributions first. And distributions, again, are moving around of patient credit amounts to other encounters where money may be owed on that same account. So I want to find those, and I want to make sure in this case, I'm going to filter it down to where the insurances are 0. So I'm going to tell it to do a search. It's going to come back with some results. What do these results mean to us? How do we work with them? That's what I'm going to jump into right here. So we're seeing the guarantors that have credit balances out there. And in some cases, the guarantor may be in a couple different practices, but in most cases here, they're in a single practice. So if we take one of those, we can expand down the guarantor line, and below that, we'll see the practice and account. Below that, we'll see who's getting the refund, who owns the credit in this case, because we're doing the distribution. So we're seeing who owns the credit, what encounter it's on, and then what charge it's on. If you need some more information, such as the financial view and the chart, you can click here and see the charges that are on there, and then the payments, adjustments, and refunds that are below that. If you want kind of a broader view, we have some screens in here that mimic the account summary and financial summary in NextGen. The account summary giving you kind of the payment history, the financial summary showing you the different buckets and where money's landing, right, between the patient and the primary, secondary, tertiary. These grids here, if you're new to Refund Manager, you can turn on the headers to see what all the different cells are. Once you get used to working with it, clients basically said, hey, if you can turn this off, it'll be a lot cleaner to look at. I can tell, what each field is because of each level, and, just this is an account number, this is one of our groups, so on and so forth. So it gives you a way to kind of clean that up. Now, the distributions themselves, we have two ways of doing that. We have the default functionality, which says, take this credit and walk it forward oldest to newest. So if we click on our distributions, so I'm going to click this checkbox, which means when we do the processing, it's going to do a distribution. It's going to move the money around, and it's going to do that using that automated methodology, oldest to newest. I can do a preview and see what's going to happen. So let me right mouse, distribution preview. There we go. I was in the white space between cells when I right clicked. So we can see on the left here where it's pulling from. So on encounter 1212, this charge, it's going to subtract $50 from the $50 patient credit. And then it's going to move it over. And in this case, it's the same encounter, but a different charge. So maybe the other charge wasn't in there yet, and they posted the whole patient payment to the initial charge, and now you want to move it down to the other charge. So it'll go ahead and do that. It'll do that move of the money between the two charges on the same encounter. So that's kind of a simple case. Let's look at one that's a little more complicated. I'm going to go down here and see we have Oscar. He has a $295 credit. Let's go ahead and do the distribution here. And I'm going to show you the default view, oldest to newest. So on the left here, again, where the money's coming from, on the right, where it's going to. So it's going to draw from encounter 1213, which has a $295 credit. Initially, it's going to draw 236 of that 295, and it's going to apply it over here on the older of these two encounters, 1214, and it's going to pay off that whole balance. Then there's some money left, about $59, so it's going to take that $59 and apply it against this other encounter, paying off 59 of the $67. Let's say you really wanted to pay off the 67 first because of the type of charge it was, or the patient history, or just the way your workflow goes. We have a screen in here where you can manage that. So instead of taking the default distribution, we can right mouse and do matching. And on the upper left here is our credit again. And on the upper right are our debits where money's owed. So remember last time we only paid off like 59 of the 67, but this time we're going to take the newer one first, and we can stop there, and the balances have been reduced. And then we have this other one left that we can choose either to pay or not pay. I'm going to go ahead and at least do a partial payment. And now we've kind of built these pairings of transactions ourselves. Okay, so instead of going oldest to newest, you can kind of go ad hoc and pick which ones you want to match up. If there were several credits here on the left, you could pick whichever one, match it to the right, and then add match pairs them up. So now instead of us going into NextGen and creating these transactions to move the money around, we've simply done some mouse clicking and we say, you know what, go ahead and process these items, and it'll create those transactions in our batch for us. It's just doing a final confirmation, and we'll go look at those in NextGen in a minute after we've walked through the refunds. So first step in the workflow, do the distributions usually, because that's money you can keep in-house without having to send out. Now that we've done the distributions, let's go look at some refunds that are sitting out there, some credits that'll be good candidates for refunds. So I changed my filter. We're going to click find, and then we'll see again the guarantors that are good candidates for refunding money. For refunds, Refund Manager will handle both the patient side refunds and the insurance side refunds. So if I go ahead and pick, let's look at Jennifer down here. Jennifer has 3 encounters that have credits on them. If we want, we can go ahead and expand this down to the charge too. And like I mentioned before, we can click on that and see kind of the chart financial view. We can look at the account summary, financial summary using the right mouse menu as I showed you before. Let's say we've done the evaluation and we said, yeah, we want to refund it. So instead of going into NextGen and creating all those transactions, we simply now put a check mark in the refund checkbox, and then we tell it to go ahead and do the refund. Now to show you how fast this is, I'm going to go ahead and pick several other refunds to send through the system also. All right, so we have a whole bunch of these queued up that normally you'd have to go create all those transactions for. We're going to tell Refund Manager to process those, so to take action based on what checkbox is checked, and boom, it just created 9 refunds for us, in a second. So that's part of the streamlining of the process. We're letting you make the decision, but when you make the decision, we're speeding up that work that has to be done to carry out your decision. So now in NextGen, we have distribution sitting out there where we've moved money around, and we have refunds sitting out there where we want to get those transactions out to your accounting system. So let's pop over a second into NextGen, and I'll pull up our batch. And then we have the 12 transactions in it, the 3 distributions and the 9 refunds. And I'm going to go ahead and balance it out, so you still have the control to review the batch, pull out anything you don't want. If you want, you submit it to the BBP and let that post it overnight if you don't do your posting during the day. So I'll go ahead and post this, and then we'll jump in and we'll look at what the distribution looks like, and we'll look at the refunds, and then we'll follow the refund through the rest of the process. So down here at the bottom, transfer patient payment is the transaction code that was used in NextGen for moving the money around. I'm going to go ahead and look here real quick at Oscar. And go into the account summary where we can see the transactions. And with the distribution, it's a plus and minus of the same amount, so the net is 0. We can go ahead and expand that and see we pulled from the encounter 213, we pushed it over to 215. We can drill down on the encounter. We can see the transactions that were created for us. If I expand this, we can see the batch it was in, the from, and the to. All right, so just like we were seeing on that screen that showed the left and right, it's keeping track of that in here. And also it's creating some encounter notes for you for documentation too. So the distributions become real straightforward. And again, the good news is you keep the money in the 4 walls of the practice instead of sending it out. Now for the rest of this part of the demo, let's go ahead and walk through one of the refund transactions and see what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and take encounter 1207, which is one of Jennifer's that we were looking at earlier. We can see here's the transaction that was just created. Here's the batch it went into. Similar to the distribution, when it was created, you got an encounter note on here. Okay, just again, further documentation, what's going on. When we export this out to the accounting system, it'll put another encounter note there. And when we do the import back, this transaction note is going to be updated with the check number, check date, and check amount without you having to do the data entry for that. So let's go back to Refund Manager. Now this could be on the same day or a later day. We can go look for those batches sitting out there that contain one or more refund transactions. So we can pick, one batch or 10 batches and go ahead and say, let's export those out to the accounting system. Now for the demo environment here, we're using QuickBooks Professional. Could be GP, it could be Sage Intacct, it could be Sage Peachtree, it could be, a number of different accounting systems that we support. Some of them, like QuickBooks, we support via a direct interface. Other ones will output files that can be imported in by the accounting system that you have. So when I say export, it's going to open up a conversation with QuickBooks, and it's going to set up those demographics and payments and do some GL mapping when it pushes the checks into QuickBooks. So as Tom mentioned, this is an automation piece where we're automating and bypassing the data entry, eliminating any mistakes that may be made keying things in. So it goes right over. Accounting's happy because they're out of the data entry business. They come in, they look at their available check batches, they can review those. We can see there's no check numbers yet. So they get in, review it, load their check stock, and print the checks. And again, they're happy because they're not having to spend, hours each week doing data entry of your refunds. So now we have the check numbers in here and they're available for us. So how do we get those back into NextGen? Well, again, at a subsequent time, same day, separate day, we come in here and we use the import tool in Refund Manager, and it'll see the batches that we've exported out. We can check them. We can say, go ahead and import them. It'll tell us that we sent over basically 9 refunds out of NextGen, and it was able to find all 9 of those in NextGen and update them with the check information. So if we come back into practice management, I haven't refreshed this yet. I'm going to bounce off and bounce back. We'll see we have the check number, check date, check amount in here for you automatically without having to do the data entry back into NextGen either. And as I promised, when we did that export out to the accounting system, it captured that in an encounter node. It also captured the address that was in play here when it was sent out too. So that's Refund Manager, streamlining and automating the refund process. The automation by you getting to review and click checkboxes to carry out your instructions, and then eliminating the data entry into the accounting system, and then back into NextGen once the checks have been printed. So let's talk a little bit about the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. So again, the user interface for this is installed into your NextGen add-ons. Refund Manager, you'd normally roll out to a number of your people, and they'd work interactively with it. The Unapplied and Deposit Manager is a little different in that there's a batch job that you can schedule in the BBP that's going to do the heavy lifting. So only 1 or 2 people in your practice would ever set up these rules. So in the upper left here, we have the encounter Unapplieds, and in the upper right, we have the account Unapplied. So these are the rules on the left here for the encounter Unapplied. Simple things like, if it matches the patient amount, the Unapplied does, go ahead and apply it, right? That's a simple one that you can even do in practice management today. But what if the unapplied amount is greater than the patient amount? Do you want to over apply it with a credit? You might if you're using Refund Manager then to refund the remaining portion of that. Or do you just want to apply it up to the patient amount and leave the rest sitting and unapplied for either future use on that encounter, or you could move it up to the account. And then, obviously if it's less than, we could go ahead and do that too. Some people use the Unapplied and Deposit Manager for cleaning up copays that have been posted over time into the unapplied bucket. So the copays, normally you'd know the specific amounts of your copays that you're looking for. It's kind of a 80-20 thing. So we'd automate the vast majority of them, then you'd go through and prune the exceptions out of your batch. So we could put in your copay amounts. And if it matches one of those amounts, then we could say, you know, apply it up to the patient amount, or, you know, apply it with a credit. So it gives you kind of a way to clean up your copays that are sitting out in Unapplieds too. And then if you have money left on the encounter, you can say, you know what, let's go ahead and move it up to the account, and then we'll use it later on future encounters. Or, you know, let's just create a task and have someone go out there and review the work log in NextGen and do something with them. All right. Additionally, we mentioned this is the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. So the deposit functionality is really an earmarking of money. So if there was money posted to an encounter with a specific transaction code, we can take that transaction code and cross-reference it against SIMs and modalities to be used later. What I did is I just brought up the form that handles that cross-referencing, where you go ahead and define it. And this situation we have set up here would be for a fertility clinic. And you might have, you know, in vitro and stuff that falls into fertility. You might have surgeries, you know, you might have miscellaneous. And what you do is on the left here, you pick a NextGen transaction code that's going to be used to post the money. And then on the left, you type in a name, you free text it. Okay, so transaction code to a name or a tag that you give it. And then on the right, you create lines and you basically reuse that name and give it a series of SIMs, or if you have your SIMs grouped into modalities, it's, you know, a modality or a combination of SIM and modality. What Unapplied and Deposit Manager will do is nightly when it runs, it'll go out and say, hey, do I have money sitting in Unapplied that was added with this transaction code? And now do I have charges that meet this criteria? If so, pull that money out of Unapplied and put it against the charge. And that way your staff doesn't have to manage that. All right, so we'd work with you to kind of build out this structure for your deposits if you're taking deposits into Unapplied and later applying them. Consequently, on the account side, we have rules that relate to that tagging, that cross-referencing. Okay, so if the money was taken in directly to account Unapplied without going to an encounter, again, we'd go ahead and use that cross-reference. Then we tell it we want to go ahead and apply that money, so we're going to use that same set that we built using those rules of transaction code to SIM or modality. And we can say, you know, if we're doing that on a particular encounter or account, go ahead and skip the general rules below. All right, so that's kind of the deposit mapping, is having that ability to cross-reference those two. Now, you may not use any of these and you may say, you know what, we just want to do the general unapplied management, try using it on the encounter, move it up to the account, and then try using it on subsequent encounters on that account. So you can try to find exact matches, or you can say always apply from the newest going forward. If it can't find anywhere to apply it and you still really want to push it down to a line item, you can say find the newest encounter that has a credit. So the most recent one that has a credit and apply it there. If there's not a most recent one with a credit, you could do something like put it on the newest encounter. So it all depends on what your unapplied causation is and how you're trying to fix it, which rules here you'd use. And as part of the installation, we'd set this up in your test environment. We'd try different rules with you. We'd let you try different things. And you know, you may decide it's a phased approach where we're doing general unapplied cleanups for a while, then we're doing copay unapplied cleanups, and then we're doing deposit management going forward. So that's really what these rules are about. It gives you a great variety of different things you can turn on or off simply by checkboxes. In the middle of the screen here, we have the ability to scope what these rules will apply to. And where this is useful is when you're testing. So you may decide, you know what, I don't want this to run several hours, and I don't want to use up all my data in the test system and unapplied, so I just want to look for unapplieds on certain providers, locations, things like that. Or I want to make sure that before I start using unapplieds that the insurances must be 0, or I'm looking for encounters within a date range. Similarly, on the account side, we can scope it down by the starting letters of the last name, Again, the encounters, let's make sure the insurances are 0, so on and so forth. So we'd help you pick all these rules. You'd go ahead and save those. And then if this was production in real life, that night, the job would run and it would go ahead and look at these rules and carry out the work. And then you'd come in the morning and you'd have batches in NextGen with the descriptions that you set up in here that you could go ahead and review, prune, and post. Now, while you're in your test system, we do give you the ability to run short amounts of data interactively, up to 5 minutes of processing. So I can show you kind of the result of what would happen overnight. So it went through our database and it created all of these transactions to move around the unapplieds. In fact, we can go over here into NextGen and see these 2 batches that were created. And again, these become just normal NextGen batches that you can open, review, and prune. Okay, so you can go ahead and step through the various transactions. If there's one you don't want, you can get rid of the pair, and then you can go ahead and post it just like you would any other NextGen batch. If you're testing and you don't like the results, you simply just delete the batch, change your parameters, and try it over again. But the whole key is here to give you a user interface to be able to select the rules that you're looking for, test them, be able to carry them out and implement them via the job that's going to run nightly or weekly, depending on your preference. So that's the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. Again, Unapplieds, general unapplied cleanups, copay unapplied cleanups, moving money from one encounter to the other encounters by going through the account, and then that deposit management functionality of being able to map the transaction code used to intake the money to be used for specific SIMs or modalities. Tom, I'll go ahead and turn it back to you to cover the rest of the slides.
Okay, thank you, Joe. And so thank you for taking us through the demonstration of both of those products and taking us through the showing us how the effectiveness and efficiency can be created using those 2 products. So as you saw, Refund Manager allows you to make it much easier for you to process credit balances and issue refund checks, and makes it much easier. And the Unapplied Deposit Manager software makes it much easier for you to manage copay dollars, unapplied balances, and deposit money as well. So a little bit about us and who we are. We were founded in 2003, and we have over 20 years of experience with NextGen. We have over 40 employees in the company from coast to coast, most of which are consultants that move from practice to practice and health center to health center, working with the organizations to improve workflows, improve business process, improve reporting, improve decision making, and help you get as much value out of your NextGen investment that you've made. We have if you take 2003 into 20 years, they do not add up. And for the reason for that is iTentive started out as the IT department for a medical organization. And back in the late 90s and early 2000s, when the business mantra back then was focus on what you do best and outsource the rest, the medical organization was going to outsource the IT group. And the leaders of the IT group said, well, if you want to do that, what we'd like to do is form our own company and provide services back to you. So they agreed to do that. And from that point forward, we have worked with over 350 to 400 clients that use NextGen. And during this time frame, we have become a strategic partner with NextGen as well. We generate our revenue through basically 5 service lines, if you will. We have consulting, which I mentioned, where we do the business process, the workflows, improvements, revenue cycle consulting, optimization of NextGen as well. We have a group of developers that can provide customization of templates and do customized reporting. We have a group of developers in Joe's group that have developed our add-on products. of which, we talked about Refund Manager, we talked about the Unapplied Deposit Manager today. Chelsea mentioned at the beginning our chart guard software. We have several other products as well that we offer. And we have a group of technology folks that can provide IT managed services, meaning that we can maintain and manage your IT infrastructure, your desktops, your laptops, your printers, your local area networks. We also have our own data center, so we can provide complete hosting out of that data center for our clients as well. We can provide help desk support for both the IT portion of your organization and also products as well, such as NextGen. And then we also generate revenue from being an authorized reseller of NextGen as well. We can provide any one of these services as a point solution, or we can provide them in combination with each other and provide an integrated solution as well. So with regards to next steps, if there's any questions that you have after today, you can contact myself or Joe. Our contact information is there on the screen. If you would like to have a more in-depth discussion about Refund Manager, Unapplied Deposit Manager software as it applies to your organization, we can do that. If you'd like to see a more detailed demonstration of either product or both products, we could do that as well. Gives you an opportunity to ask specific questions as it pertains to your practice and to your processes. So with that, we'll go ahead and answer any questions for you.
Great, thank you so much, Joe and Tom. Appreciate the demo and the thank you for everything you guys did. Okay, so our first question is, does this only work for patient payments?
The Refund Manager works for both patient and insurances. So if you have insurances that you're still refunding, we know some of you do recoupment instead of refunds, and that's fine. But you can use it for insurances too. We also know that the big part of the refund problem in your NextGen database is typically patient-based. So it's usually, like 75-25 patients to insurance. So it'll do both. It's flexible.
Awesome, thank you, Joe. Next question, could you please list the accounting software this integrates with?
We can provide that via email, but it's a lot of the major packages out there. It's QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Enterprise, Dynamics GP, which was formerly Great Plains, quite a few versions of that, a number of the Sage products, Abila MIP, just to name a few.
Great, thank you. And it looks like this might be our last question. How long does training typically take on these products?
The Refund Manager, both of them are somewhat similar, and the training is somewhat quick, as you saw. With the Unapplied and Deposit Manager, normally it's more just you trying it in your test environment once we install it, and fine-tuning the rules that you want and how you want them to work. And like I said, you may use one set of rules for a while to clean up one problem, and then once that one's done, move on to the next set. The Unapplied and Deposit Manager, really is created to get the vast majority of your unapplieds cleaned up, and then, leave your folks free to handle the exceptions. Refund Manager, the way we handle that is after install, we'll provide you the user guide and some training videos to review. Once we have Refund Manager installed in test, we'll walk through in a 90-minute call with you, handling some refunds from end to end. So finding those credits, doing distributions, creating refund transactions, pushing it out to your accounting system, pulling it back. And all that does two things. One, you get to see the process on your system, and two, we get to make sure everything is wired in correctly, right, between NextGen, Refund Manager, and your accounting system. So on both systems, we handhold you through the process. We want to make sure at the end, when we're done, that the system's working and you're able to successfully use it.
Great, thank you, Joe. Well, it looks like that's it. I'm always disappointed when nobody comes at you with the really hard questions, Joe. But if anybody thinks of any questions that they haven't had time to ask or that occur to us after the fact, you see both Tom and Joe's information up on the screen. You can feel free to reach out to them directly. Otherwise, I'll be sending out an email within a couple days here with a link to the recording and slides. You can always reply back to that. Basically, any way that you can get hold of us, we're happy to help. We'd love to answer your questions, so don't hesitate to ask. And I think
Thank you
that's
very
all we
much,
have for
everyone.
today. Yeah, thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.